Hey there, vinyl community. Today I'm going to be counting down and ranking all 7 currently in print Deutsche Grammophon Original Source Series record reissues. I'm going to be going from my least favorite to my favorite, so stick around to see what those are. Hey there, everyone. So I thought, since we're at a lull in the slew of Deutsche Grammophon reissues right now, with the next batch due out next month, I would take the time to look at all 7 releases that have been put out so far and rank them from my least favorite to my favorite. So all of these releases have received very, very in-depth reviews from both myself and my fellow Track and Angle writer Mark Ward, and I will link those in the description. So I've given my thoughts in depth on a couple releases, and Mark has written wonderful things about the first batch. But I thought it would be fun to just make a quick video where I kind of give an overview of everything that we've seen so far, and I rank the releases in order of my personal favorite. So without further ado, let's get started. So the most recent batch of original source titles released this month, and this is my least favorite Deutsche Grammophon title reissued so far, is gonna be the Verdi Requiem with Herbert von Karajan and the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. And why was this not my favorite? There's a few things. I think just the recording in general just lacks bass, and when you're listening to a piece as massive as the Verdi Requiem with, what are supposed to be those big, powerful bass drum hits in the Dies Irae, it goes bum, 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 that should really shake the room. And I just found that most of the information in this recording, whether that be choices in the engineering or just the acoustic of the hall that they recorded in, the Jesus Christukirche in Berlin, whatever the factors are, both the original pressing I listened to, which is right over here, and this new reissue, just lacked bass in general. And I think for some pieces that might not be a big deal, but for the Requiem it is. And I thought the orchestra was engineered to play second fiddle to the soloists. The soloists are captured beautifully on this. If you're a fan of opera singing, or just a fan of really listening in depth to vocalists and vocal soloists, this recording is still worth picking up. But I think as a whole, as a presentation of the Verdi Requiem, which is a very epic piece, I just think there are other recordings that do it better that you can get for cheaper. So this is my least favorite of the 7. Number 6, my second least favorite, getting closer to my top favorites, is one that I had a lot to say about in my recent review, and so I'm not going to kind of rehash that review, but it is the recording of Emil Jalel and the Berlin Philharmonic, conducted by Joachim Joachim, of the 2 Brahms piano concertos. Now, there is a lot to like in this recording. Well, first of all, the performance is spectacular. If you are just buying these recordings for the performances, full speed ahead, this is a fantastic performance. This is one of the best performances of both Brahms concertos that you can buy on record, so rest assured on that. The Berlin Phil is playing wonderfully. Joachim is fully in control, but still with enough flexibility given to the soloist that I think there's a great push and pull here. And Jalel is in such command of both his own part and just the score of this piece that everything is working like clockwork, not to mention the fact that Jalel is playing with such ferocity and such force. It really comes across in the recording. And there's some things that I think the original source team, Emil Berliner, Sidney Meyer, and Rainer Milliard, really did well on this. The piano sound is spectacular. It actually sounds like a real piano now, as opposed to on the original release, where it sounds kind of like a muddied, muffled mess. The original piano sound on the original Deutsche Grammophon version is not very good. They really fixed the piano sound here. However, there are problems. it is in I'll link to my review because that will explain it better than I want to get into here, and I'd like you to read the actual tracking angle review. But there are parts of this first side that were just cut a little too hot and lead to distortion, clipping, whatever you want to call it, where it's just everything is overdriven. In addition to that, the second piano concerto, the second movement, will distort on almost every system I've encountered because it is simply cut too close to the groove. I think the timing for the side three, the first and second movements of the second concerto, are at like 28 minutes. And here's the thing, 28 minutes, you can get that onto a side of a record if you compress the living daylights out of it. But if you are cutting to full dynamics, which is definitely what these guys are doing, they're cutting really, really hot grooves. If you do that and make the side 28 minutes, you are going to run into inner groove distortion. And if there is a system setup tracking out there that is not hitting inner groove distortion on this side three, then congratulations, you have a very, very accomplished tone arm setup. But neither myself nor the other writers of the tracking angle could get this to track without some noticeable breakup of the final chords of the second movement of the second concerto. So this is one of those beautiful but flawed records, and I think it's such a good performance though that if you really, I would recommend even just streaming this performance. Because I think it's one of the best performances of the Brahms piano concertos out there. But if you're looking for really, rich, warm audiophile sound that doesn't, clip when the music gets too intense, might want to look elsewhere. The good news is, of all the original Source series records reissued so far, those are the only two that I had really any major issues with. The rest I would highly recommend. So now we're getting into the stuff that I actually really, really like. So my number 5 pick is the Franz Schubert Quintet for piano, violin, viola, cello, and double bass in A major, also known as the Trout Quintet. This is one of the most often recorded and famous pieces of chamber music that exists. And there's hundreds and hundreds of stellar recordings of this out there. I mean, it's really one of the most often recorded pieces of chamber music you can find. Any major chamber ensemble has recorded this, and so there's a lot of recordings to choose from. I think the playing by Émile Gilel here, just like on the Brahms, is spectacular. He has a great intensity to his playing in a very masterful technical command of the instrument. And I think technically the playing of the rest of the members here is really great. I think the string tone on this exhibits a little bit of that Deutsche Grammophon thinness, glassiness in the strings that a lot of the other reissues of this in this series have managed to avoid, but this one does sound a little not thin but hard. There's a hardness to the violin sound that you just don't get with RCA Living Stereo or Decca recordings. In fact, if you're looking for a really outstanding recording of this quintet, I would recommend checking out the Decca recording, either on London Decca or reissued by Speaker's Corner. It's one of the earlier London Deccas out there, one of the earlier Decca recordings. I think for the Decca catalog number, it's in the 2000 series. But there is a great Speaker's Corner reissue of this you can pick up for, I think on the secondary market, you can get that for about the same price that this is. And I think that is a much richer string tone, and it's probably a more enjoyable listening experience. I think both performances are very good, but that's members of the Vienna Octet that are playing on that recording, and you take that great performance and mix it with that great early Decca tube sound, and I think that gives it an edge over this recording. But I would still, if you were already a fan of this recording with Émile Gilel's, I would say, this is a no-brainer. They've improved a lot on this, especially the piano sound. The piano sound now sounds like a real piano, and I think that's one of the biggest accomplishments that Emil Berliner have managed to do with these recordings is make the sound of the instruments a lot more lifelike. All right, number 4. Now we're getting into the really good stuff. These are all releases that I really enjoyed and would absolutely buy again if given the opportunity. These are I think the must-own 4 releases in this set. So number 4 is Gustav Mahler's Symphony Number 5 with Herbert von Karajan and the Berlin Philharmonic. So I said before, that I think I said this in the video I did with Mark on the tracking angle, is that Herbert von Karajan was not considered a Mahler conductor, and he only started conducting Mahler much later into his career. Really, it was people like Leonard Bernstein, Bruno Walter, these guys, Otto Klemperer, Barbaroli. These were the Mahler conductors of their time. Karajan was never considered a Mahler conductor, and he didn't record very many Mahler symphonies. And again, it came later out his life. This is his first recording of the Symphony Number 5, released in the early 70s. Despite that, I think Karajan does a very good job here, and the Berlin Philharmonic are playing excellently, despite the fact that this is repertoire that is perhaps a little bit outside of their comfort zone. We have excellent brass playing here in a sound stage and a level of detail in this huge, massive orchestra that I have not previously heard on a Berlin Philharmonic Deutsche Grammophon recording before. I mean, to hear the Berlin Phil at this scale with this huge soundstage in front of you, where you can pick out the placement of all the instruments, you can hear the trumpet call in the back of the hall, you can hear, the way the horns were arranged, you can hear the depth of the string sections. I think that's really spectacular. Do I have any sonic complaints? I think the strings, the violins, the first violins, when they're really going for it, can get a little thin and brittle, and that seems to be just how a lot of these Deutsche Grammophon 70s records, that seems to be just what's on the recording. I don't think that's something that Emil Berliner could ever get rid of through remixing or remastering. But I don't think it's that bad. It only comes across in a few places. It's not nearly as brittle as the sound on the Brahms record or on the Verdi record. I think there's much better bass on this. I think the sound is pretty balanced, and it's just so much fun. I mean, it's so difficult to put a Mahler symphony on vinyl. There's so many dynamics involved. He goes from the most quiet, intimate moments to the loudest, most bombastic moments with 80 people, 90 people playing at one time on one stage. So the fact that they were able to cut this so precisely is a huge credit to Emil Berliner, and I think this is definitely worth picking up. It's not the Mahler 5 performance that I would go to first. Like, if someone's never heard Mahler 5 before, I would say stream the Bernstein with New York. Stream the, what's the really good one? I think it's the Barbaroli. The Barbaroli on EMI, if I remember right, is really spectacular. But, after you listen to those, if you want a really good record, vinyl record that you can get that sounds great, that's cut great, of a Mahler symphony, Symphony Number 5, I would say go for this. Number 3. This is a record I had so much fun reviewing, and this is the double header of Claudio Abbado and the Boston Symphony Orchestra conducting the Debussy 3 Nocturnes, Ravel's Second Suite of Daphnis and Chloe, and the Pavane for a Dead Princess. This is such a spectacular recording of just incredible playing by the Boston Symphony Orchestra from definitely an overlooked period in their career, because record collectors, a lot of our Boston Symphony recordings are going to be the Munch recordings on RCA, which are fantastic. But by the 1970s, the Boston Symphony Orchestra was a well-oiled machine that knew French music like the back of their hand, and they have this young up-and-coming conductor, Claudio Abbado, here, coming in with a clear artistic vision, and the result is really, really spectacular performances, and the level of detail, soundstage, width, picture on this recording, I think is outstanding and well worth picking up. Do I have any complaints? Well, the tonal meter still leans a little bit on the bright side, but I think on this music it works. There is still, the bass is a little less present than I would prefer. I listened to actually a lot of different recordings of these pieces in preparation for when I was reviewing this for the tracking angle. And there's some great ones out there. I mean, the first one I think of is this recording of you know, the second suite of Daphnis and Chloe is mostly just the end of the full ballet. And so I listened to this recording of the full ballet with André Clotin and the Paris Conservatory Orchestra. This is a pretty legendary recording. Original pressings of this was originally released on British Columbia, on UK Columbia, with the SAX catalog number, in a box set called Ravel Orchestral Works. That box set goes for about $2,500. There is a reissue of that box set that was done by EMI Testament in the 90s. That goes for a couple $100 now. And then, of course, there's the Electric Recording Company that did a basically flat transfer of the tapes for a release in a box set, and that was $1,500 when it was released, and now it goes for even more. But there is a version of this from this box set that you can get on record, and it's the Classics for Pleasure, CFP 4323. A lot of people don't know about these Classics for Pleasure records, but these were reissues of some of the EMI, early EMI catalog that were done in the 1980s. And most of them, some of them, I would say maybe 75% of these reissues of the former Columbia SAX catalog use the same metal parts. So if you were to look back here, on this label, if you were to look in the dead wax here, I think this is YEA or Y2X or something like that. It's the original matrix number for the multi-$1,000 record that collectors go crazy for, and this was $10. And this is a spectacular recording, incredibly balanced. I think the performance, for at least the Daphnis portion, I think the performance of the BSO on this original source record beats it. I think the performance is, in fact, better. The playing is more refined. There's a great energy to Clotin's conducting here, but it's just I would say the playing from the individual members is not quite as refined as it is on the Boston Symphony recording. But, you know, for $10, $15, this is definitely worth picking up as well, I think. Let's see, I just pulled out a few of these records. I mean, this is the original Deutsche Grammophon pressing, which I think sounds very, very bad. So avoid that. But there's some great cuts of this repertoire out there. If we're talking about the Debussy with the three nocturnes, I mean, there's a really great recording actually that was cut by Kevin Gray on Speaker's Corner. That is him playing Leonard Bernstein in the New York Philharmonic, playing the three nocturnes, and also a little bit of Prelude to the Afternoon of the Faun. You know, the original Columbias, like the original Deutsche Grammophon records, are not very good. They're quite shrill and compact and not enjoyable to listen to, but man, what Kevin Gray was able to do with this original Columbia tape is really spectacular. So this is also worth checking out, and I think this is still in print. You can still get it from some record dealers. Another great recording of the three nocturnes is this one on Mercury with Paul Perret and the Detroit Symphony. Again, I mean, all these Mercuries are fantastic. This is the Speaker's Corner reissue, which I think is astounding, as good as the originals. And this is just this is the same pairing as what's on the Abato. This is the Debussy three nocturnes and the Daphnis and Chloe Suite No. 2. And while I really like this performance, and I think the sound is so enveloping and gripping and so warm and even-bodied throughout the frequency spectrum, the performance is nowhere near as good as the Deutsche Grammophon. It's not as good as the Clotin recording, and it's not as good as the Abato recording at all. So, great sound and a good performance. Like I said, none of these are bad, but you know, after comparing this back to back with the performance that Abato was able to get out of the Boston Symphony, I think it's a no-brainer. I'd rather listen to the Boston because it's a much more refined, engaging performance. But the only one that I found that I think could beat the Abato in terms of performance is this one, which is kind of a famous record. This is Bernard Haitink and the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra playing the three nocturnes. And boy, is this a beautiful record. I mean, the playing from the Concertgebouw here is really spectacular. And this is a record that you can get for under $10. I mean, it's just a 70s Philips pressing. Actually, it might even be like 1980. Yeah, this is a 1980 release on Dutch Philips. Not expensive to find at all. But it does not sound as good as the Deutsche Grammophon original source reissue does. So I think this is just miraculous because we have a really, really like high level up there in the pantheon performance and really, really excellent detailed sound. And what's so cool about listening to, you know, this type of mastering of Ravel and Debussy, and that both these composers, there's always so much going on in the orchestration. There's so much texture, there's so much fluttering of the woodwinds, all these different runs and parts that are sometimes hard to hear when you're listening to a what's quote-unquote classic recording. Some of that doesn't always come out, but on this record, I mean, it all comes through, and it's not annoying detail. It's the detail that kind of opens up. So I really love what they were able to do with this recording, and that's why it's my number 3 favorite. Number 2 is one that a lot of people have been wowed by, and it was no exception. It's a recording that was not even on my radar prior to this series, and that is Claudio Abbado and the London Symphony playing Stravinsky's Rite of Spring Ballet, Le Sacre du Printemps. I think I'm kind of pronouncing that right. I had never even been aware of this recording before because there's so many great Rites of Spring out there. I mean, there's the Schulte on Decca, there's the Columbia with Bernstein, there's the Boulez. I mean, if you think about a Deutsche Grammophon recording of the Rite of Spring, you usually think about the Boulez. There's a lot of great ones out there, and some not so great ones. I mean, there's the Goossens that I reviewed years ago for Analog Planet. That fantastic sound, but not great playing. It's just one of those standard pieces that gets recorded a lot. There's the Stravinsky's own version, which I think is really interesting, but maybe not my favorite. So this was not on my radar, but I really enjoyed the playing of the LSO here. I thought it was just fiery enough, but just controlled enough. And Abbado really did a great job directing all the twists and turns in this piece. And the sound is spectacular. This one has real bass. Of the reissues here, this one has real, present, in-your-face low end that a lot of these other Deutsche Grammophon recordings just don't seem to have. And it may be because of where it was recorded. Yeah, I think this is absolutely fantastic. And if you're not familiar with this piece, this is kind of one of those like line in the ground markings in the history of music, in the history of classical music, and the history of orchestral music, but just the history of music in general, where it's like we are in the modern era now. And this was Stravinsky's kind of statement of modernism in music, of doing away with the old traditions of romanticism in music and making something that was significantly more angular, more depicting of brutality and not sweeping long lines. So it's a very important piece that everyone should have in their collection. If you have a record collection and don't have a recording of the Rite of Spring, get this one. It's really good, and you'll enjoy the sound and you'll enjoy the performance. So if you're familiar with the series and the records that have been reissued so far, you know what's coming next. But if you're not, here. Carlos Kleiber and the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra playing Beethoven Symphony No. 7 in A major. Kleiber recordings on Deutsche Grammophon are something special. They're all special because Kleiber was a very unique recording artist, recording conductor, where he really limited the number of recordings he did. He was not a prolific recording artist. There's not a lot of recordings out there of him, but all of them are outstandingly excellent, uniquely excellent. And his most famous recording is the Symphony No. 5, also with the Vienna Philharmonic. Beethoven 5 is one of the best recordings of a classical music piece ever done. But you should not overlook Symphony No. 7. It's one of the best from the composer. I mean, I think if you really want to understand what Beethoven's music, his orchestral music is about, I think Symphony No. 7 is a great place to start. And all the control that Kleiber has over the Vienna Phil, how much you can tell the orchestra respects him, how well rehearsed the musicians are. I mean, they know this piece like the back of their hand anyway. It's the Vienna Phil. They've been playing Beethoven for 200 years. But they really, they understand this music. And they have, I think the respect they have for Kleiber here shows, and this is a landmark recording, and the remastering job that Emil Berliner has done on this is spectacular. Again, just like the Mahler, just like the Stravinsky, huge wide soundstage. You can really pick out the individual instruments, and it's a little easier to do here on this recording because the orchestra is more compact, smaller. It's an early Romantic orchestra, so you don't have a full brass section. You really just have French horns and a more modest woodwind section. And so you can really hear the interplay between all the different sections, between the principals, parts of the symphony that really operate like chamber music. You can really hear that in this recording, in this remastering, and I'm so glad they picked this. It's these Kleiber recordings on Deutsche Grammophon really should always be in print and available on a high quality sounding source, because they are so spectacular. And these are recordings that I heard about when I was a music student. You would be, if you're playing Beethoven next week in orchestra, you're getting together with your friends and they go, oh no, you gotta, to study, you gotta listen to the Kleiber recording. I mean, this is, 18-year-olds are aware of this in music school, how good these recordings are. So definitely one that if you were on the fence about this, grab it before it's gone, because it is really a spectacular performance, a spectacular recording, and a really, really great reissue and cut by Sidney Meyer and Rainer Maillard at Emil Berliner. I think this is the best one they've done so far, and it is my #1 pick. If you enjoyed that countdown, let me know down in the comments. Give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button so I can have the motivation to keep doing more videos. And what is your original source series ranking list? How would you rank these releases? What have you heard? What did you like? What did you not like? Let me know down in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.